The whole experience that I've had professionally has been to face failure, lean into the failure, learn from it, and do better next time. And that's all we can do. We're all imperfect humans. None of us comes out as fully formed. Learn from your mistakes, make all the mistakes, take risks. You've got lots of opportunity later to put your lessons into practice.
Let me invite you to sit back, drop your jaw, tongue, and shoulders, take a deep breath, and if you wish, close your eyes for a moment and feel the beat within. In a few seconds, you just jumped from your head to your heart and felt the beat within, opening up to receive even more value and fulfillment out of your business and life. And today's episode. I am your host, Nico van der Venne, confidant to successful CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs who are striving to achieve everlasting fulfillment. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I have a small request. If you find value in our podcast, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you amazing content and amazing guests. Share this episode with someone who could benefit from it and join our community of like-minded individuals on this journey to everlasting. Thank you for your support, and let's get started. Now, first, my introduction of our next guest, Peter Bonney. Peter Bonney is the CEO and founder of FastBreak, a B2B SaaS company that helps sales and pre-sales teams leverage the company's knowledge and collaborate seamlessly with internal subject matter experts to make complex deals faster and easier. Previously, Peter was a CEO and co-founder of Vendorful, a SaaS platform focused on making complex procurement processes more efficient and transparent. Peter, you have a beautiful history, an interesting history, and I am looking forward to you telling us who you are, and go right ahead, I would say.
Thank you very much, Nico. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah. So that was a great introduction, and certainly covered the last 9 years or so of my professional experience. But interestingly, before I got into software, I had a whole separate career in finance. I worked on Wall Street from just after the dot-com boom to about 2015. And I spent most of that time at a hedge fund there for a part of 13 years. I was a partner and portfolio manager there. So had a successful career before I decided to change careers and do something different. And so, I think that might be also an interesting thing to get into, kind of going through that journey. But yeah, so I've been, I got really interested late in my Wall Street career in the problem of how businesses actually engage in kind of like these complex commercial transactions. And specifically how companies buy and sell things, right? And this was partly from personal experience and watching portfolio companies struggle with having to make these multi-$100 million investments in partners, right? I'm not talking about acquiring a company. I'm talking about buying a service or a product, engaging with a construction company for a massive mine project, say, right? Where you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. If you're a small company and you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars to build a speculative mine, you're kind of betting your entire company on this one business relationship. It's a challenge to get it right. I saw a lot of companies get it wrong. And so I got very, very interested in those sorts of interactions. And that's really what I've been focused on for the last 9 years, now with 2 different companies sort of tackling the problem from 2 different sides.
So let's jump back to your history there, where you were saying you were jumping from one career path to another one, because that's, interests to me. I must say, if I'm listening what you're saying, you're a pretty high achieving individual. You'll probably met some challenges along the way when transitioning from one thing to another. Could you, deep dive a little bit on that?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, I would say probably my entire career was a series of having to transition from one thing to another. Even though I was in the same company, I was at this one fund for 13 years. I knew nothing. I was the junior analyst on the desk, and eventually became a partner, and then, ran a pretty large portfolio, and then contracted to take over an even larger portfolio, sort of post financial crisis world. That whole time, and really, I think anyone who's working on Wall Street, particularly in investment management, nothing is static. Like, you've got to constantly be reinventing yourself. The strategy that was working really well and paying money, last year, this year might not work anymore. Right. And so, over the course of my career, in addition to sort of growing, progressing in my own knowledge and going from, working for somebody else to then working for myself inside the company, I had to constantly be looking for new and different things to do that were, would actually be profitable going forward, because, the past is never repeats. Right. Constant process.
Now, if you talk about Wall Street, I always have this, the big bulls is the first things that comes to mind to me.
Right.
I spent some time in New York, in a previous life, I would say. It's a very big hustle and bustle, Wall Street. It's something that goes on and on and on. And I can imagine what you're saying. It switches constantly, but I see the same relation without the bull in IT. So especially when you're talking about SaaS, I've been 15 years in IT myself. I was more a hardware kind of guy, engineer and support here, but kind of quickly went into management in that perspective. But now you're gone from one hustle and bustle into another hustle and bustle, because if you're talking about the dot-com era, that was a time where the computers were, becoming mainstream, and IT guys were exceptional people walking around in the office, and everybody liked them because they fixed stuff. Now going over to the cloud story, where SaaS becomes reality. Let's first, tell some of our listeners what SaaS stands for, because I think that might be interesting. We're talking, abbreviations are something that I've lived with for my whole life, but a lot of people ask me, so what do you mean? So what's your take on SaaS? Let's say that.
Yeah. So SaaS, for those who don't know, stands for software as a service. And the idea is that you have software that, can run on your computer locally, right? Like back in the day, you would have, Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel installed locally, and maybe you still do, although even those are now very frequently cloud-based. But, you have your programs that you run on your computer locally, and then companies have programs, business productivity software, which historically has been installed in servers on their premises, called on-premise software. And, so something like SAP is a, famous example, or an Oracle database, right? Like a giant database that literally runs on internal servers that people inside the organization will access for programs tasks. Now, the SaaS revolution sort of introduced this idea that you don't necessarily need to physically deliver software to a location. It doesn't need to operate in a specific data center inside your office or on your computer locally. That you can access tools that you want to use for productivity over the internet. And so this kind of has a number of different effects. Like IT overhead is much lower. There's nothing to install. You're just using a browser, right? And it means that the cross-platform compatibility is a lot easier. It doesn't matter if you're using a Mac or a PC. You can access Google Documents through the cloud. You can access the Microsoft Excel through the cloud, and then everybody sort of is able to kind of operate on the same tools, whether or not they have the same IT setup. And then on top of that, for companies, by accessing software like enterprise level software through the cloud, they don't have to maintain the servers. Now they're obviously paying for that infrastructure to be provided by the SaaS company. It's not one of the interesting things with cloud software. People are discovering it's not necessarily cheaper. It is a different type of cost, right? Depending on the type of organization, you may or may not want to service servers on premise. We're a small company. We're entirely remote. We're, classic start. I don't want to be running physical servers. I want all of my software to come through the cloud. We get to, 500, 1,000 people. It'll probably be the same calculus. We got to being like 10,000 people with multiple physical large offices, might be a different equation. But, the answer is different for every company, but it provides a different delivery mechanism and distribution mechanism, which has opened up a lot of opportunities.
Indeed. Yeah, SaaS is something that people don't even know that exists. They use daily. We're actually using Stream now, and it's a SaaS product. I don't have any recording running on my computer, so it's just wonderful that we can connect from across the ocean in our conversation with this system. That's the amazing part about it. Now, you went from Wall Street to the IT world. Now they're transitioning there. What are the differences in leadership skills that you encountered?
Yeah, it's wow. That's see, I haven't really thought about that. There's so many that come to mind. I would say, interestingly, when I was at the hedge fund, I was involved in some of the business management of the company. That was sort of how we were structured. Partners all got involved in the business of the whole organization, and not all firms operate that way. Sometimes they'll have kind of a business management team, and sort of the partners are kind of focused on just investing, not getting involved in things like HR and IT and sort of the infrastructure. I had some exposure through that, but it really is secondary. Like when you're an investment firm, your job is to make money for investors, right? And that is how you were judged. And when you get up to like the C-suite level, then, a lot of your job is in talking to investors and things like that. And I wasn't at that level. I was, well below that. So I rarely spoke to our investors directly. I was very, very focused on my little team, running a portfolio and the day-to-day execution of doing that. So, leadership was kind of very short term, I would say. You're not sort of thinking, at least in my seat, how are we planning for the next 5 years? It's like, how are we planning for the next quarter?
Yeah.
Like what, what investments are we making, for, a time horizon that we care about? How am I expanding the skill? Do I have the resources that I need? Fine. Maybe thinking a year ahead, like, am I going to need another intern? Do I need an analyst? Do I need to make some personnel changes? But much shorter time scale. Running a software company, even an early stage one, is definitely much longer term. Like you have to think further ahead. Yes, you're still kind of putting out the daily fires. Like, what do our customers need today? How are we going to deliver this feature in the next month? That sort of thing. But always with a mind to like, okay, what choices are we making today that could be problematic for us a year, 2 years down the road in terms of technical debt, the software we're building, design decisions we've made, the strategic direction of the company, right? Like when you position a software product, meaning you decide like, fine, I've got a product, I could try to sell it to different sets of people, and that's going to involve maybe packaging it up in different ways. Like, how do we talk about it? What features do we focus on? Who do we try to, reach to talk about it with? Those decisions have impacts a year, 2 years down the road, right? Like if you position your company and like, we are focused on the health insurance space and we are trying to sell to those people. Well, that's going to mean that your website is not probably filled with content to target IT people or other SaaS companies, right? And so all of that has an impact on how people find you, how you rank in Google, and it's all very, very long-term, long-tail stuff.
So yeah, that's a clear difference in what position you're rolling the dice, I would say. Because what I've noticed, I used to work for big corporations like Verizon and IBM, and the things they were saying about the quarterly review was very prevalent there as well. So the levels that we were working, even in our projects, was the project has an end date, supposedly. That deadlines are made to be broken, as they say.
Right.
There was no problem right there to do that. But I think a lot of companies have that issue. But leadership wise,
Mm.
if what I'm hearing is, if you look like at the following quarter, it does limit your opportunity as a leader to create a certain vision and strategy for the team that you're managing, because it's just a day to day putting out fires, getting stuff done, making the quotas that are out there. What you're saying is, at your current position, you're actually thinking a lot further than that quarter, and it also means that your team needs to know where you're going. Now, what I've
Yes.
noticed in the past is there's a lot of C-level um, people that have that strategic view, and then they're like, okay, we need XYZ person to fulfill that view or that strategy or vision. And they kind of stumble at that point to become so involved with the people that they hire that they get the experts in, but they don't let the experts be experts. Is that something that you've experienced in the past, or?
Yeah. I would say that's interesting. I try not, I'm not trying to, over compliment myself here. I don't know if that's something I
Fine, go
really
right ahead.
struggle with. Yeah. So my approach to managing people being this introduces different blind spots, but not that particular one. I don't like to micromanage people. I really don't. If anything, I definitely err on the side of under managing. I think that is a weakness of mine. I've tended to focus a lot on hiring somebody that I trust for a role, giving them as much context as I can, and then letting them own their domain and letting them run with what they need to, and giving them the resources that they need to do it. Now, like I said, it's not to say that makes me, better than anybody else, because I think, if anything, I've run into situations where I've been sort of too reliant on their ability to execute, too trusting, too hands off, where if I had intervened a little sooner, if I'd been a little bit more in the details of what they were doing, how they were running their domain, I might have corrected problems earlier and identified situations where we needed to change course earlier. I think, I have, one of the things people talk about is that you don't want to decide that you've waited too long to change the person in the seat. You don't want to, better to fire somebody early than late. And I have tended to err on the side of firing people too late. So that's been a challenge of mine to deal with.
So you're talking about this as if you actually noticed the issue very clearly. What triggers that for you? Because you'll probably have a trigger somewhere that says, should have done this earlier. What triggered it?
Yeah. So it's always obvious in hindsight, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Where, somebody leaves the organization and you're like, oh man, yeah, you know what? I didn't need them, or, things are now operating a little bit more smoothly. Or, okay, well, let me give a concrete example. Very, very first head of sales in my last company, Wonderful. I would say that my co-founder and I made the classic startup mistake of trying to get out of founder-led sales too soon. We sort of thought okay, we've got enough of a process. We can hand this off to a professional and they're going to do a better job of it than we are. And that wasn't really the case. We didn't have enough process yet. We weren't in a position where somebody really could come in sort of without having been around the company, for a long time and just sort of succeed because everything was in place for them. So, we lost, frankly, several deals, because we ignored our own instinct for how to pursue things and sort of said, hey, you know what? Hey, look, this is his domain. He is a professional salesperson. We are not. We're going to trust him. And not only are we going to trust him, like we're going to let him take that risk, right? That like, that's what we need to do as leaders. Like we've got to let him spread his wings and either fly or fall, which is fine in a sense. But when you're at an early stage startup and you're a leader of that company, those kinds of decisions, those kinds of failures have a lot of knock-on consequences, right? Like, look, if you're sitting at $100 million of revenue and you lose a $200,000 deal, it's not the end of the world. If you're sitting at $500,000 of revenue and you lose a $200,000 deal, that is a real impact on your future. And so it was obvious in hindsight, from how certain deals progressed and how at the time it was not just hindsight. We were co-founder and I were discussing amongst ourselves. I think we should do this differently, but we're gonna follow. We're just gonna follow his lead. And then once we'd made the change and we were back to leading sales ourselves again, we're like, wait, this is more comfortable. We're more comfortable with how this is going. It's going better. So that's on us for not recognizing earlier that it wasn't working.
So did you take that experience with you into your new environment and apply it a lot quicker? Or was there less of a trigger to use it again? Because if you're saying that sometimes you still, don't take that decision quickly, what for you is now the limit of actually, firing somebody?
Well, so I'm trying to approach it differently because I'm sort of aware of this issue I have, and I'm sort of taking almost the opposite approach where I am against my instinct, maybe holding on to a lot more things myself, and instead of thinking, can I hand this off? I'm asking, do I need to hand this off? Right? Like, if I don't hand this off, is it not going to happen? So that has led, honestly, to me holding on to a lot more things and doing a lot more stuff myself a lot longer than we did with my last company. And it has forced me to get more efficient, with the consequence that I'm finding actually I haven't needed as much support for certain tasks like marketing and sales as I thought I did the first time around. And I'm sort of like just setting the horizon further in the distance, right? That before I was thinking like, okay, well, whenever once we get like a few benchmark nameplate customers, like we should hire a salesperson. Now I'm thinking like, no, I'm going to hire a salesperson when I am so busy with sales that I'm losing opportunities because I literally can't follow up. That's going to be my benchmark for when I need to hire a salesperson. Now, I think one benefit has been that I'm less, because I'm having to be so focused on those things that before I was like, I got to hand this off. I'm so focused on those things that I'm not as involved in the jobs where I do have somebody that's working really, really well, right? Like our lead engineer, I've now worked with him 2 different companies. It's going great. I have a tremendous amount of trust in him. And whereas in my last company, I got a little bit involved in coding and managing the ins and outs of the product. I'm, really managing the product at a much like higher level now, sort of major decisions about what are we going to build, and not getting involved at all in any technical decision of how we build it. So I think it's made him operate more efficiently and his team operate more efficiently. So it's been a benefit all around. But I mean, to go back to your question, like I've not had to let go of anybody because I've been much, much more cautious about hiring anybody until I know that like I absolutely must hire someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Is this a point where you might say it kind of reversed the whole story, where before you were, lagging along with, actually firing? So I have the exact
Mhm.
same situation, but I'm an external freelancer within a
Mhm.
company, and there are issues within the team. In my mind, it's like pluck the dirty apple and throw it into the bin. I'm very radical in those decisions, but my team leads are, we'll try this first and that and that and
Mhm.
that. While I'm like, listen, there is an issue. It's very clearly there. But these people also, it's been a
Mhm.
hard time to get them on board anyways, just
Mhm.
find somebody to do the job was not easy. So they're like, but we have them now. We're going to try it anyway. And after like 2 or 3 tries, I'm like, sorry, you get 2 opportunities.
Yeah.
And if you fuck up those two, pardon my French, it is just the end. Or
Mhm.
we just shift you to somebody else where you might feel much better. Um, but that also, it's a bit extreme how I do it. But it's kind of what I'm hearing is that you kind of shift to another point where you just become very cautious of even hiring somebody who could do a certain job, and that you are actually managing a lot of, or putting a lot of energy in a point where somebody else could do it. I perfectly understand, of course. And
Mhm.
it's amazing what you're saying, that you're actually releasing the other part where you're sure it's fine, those guys are doing a great job, and you're just really enjoying what happens there. Of course, it's your
Mhm.
core business, so I'm very happy for you. It's your engineering part, that's fine. But that's something that I did notice in the past as well, is where
Yeah.
at some point leadership is becoming a risk oriented story, where you
Mhm.
just say, hey, you know what, I don't always have time to do these things. So let's try to put somebody there who has potential. They have the
Mhm.
right mental attitude. They might not have the
Mhm.
100% skills,
Mhm.
but you can guide them. Of course, it takes time for you as well.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
it's not a give or take. It's a give. It's very different. Is that something that you're thinking about, or how does that run in yours?
It is. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I know that, look, you didn't explain it exactly this way, but the way I'm thinking about it all the time, just broadly speaking, leadership aside, just decisions I've made that, like, like, all I can think about from my last business is the things that went wrong. There were a lot of things that went right as well,
Yes.
right? We exited the business, it did okay. It was fine. A lot of things went right. All I can think about, honestly, is just the mistakes I made, the things that went wrong. And like, the pendulum was over here. I am now swinging the pendulum consciously, totally the other way as much as possible. I'm just trying to be aware of my personal biases and the way that I tend to behave and the mistakes I've made in the past, and say, I'm going to, for lack of any better way to approach it, I'm going to do the exact opposite this time until I find that I am wrong there as well. And then I'll try to modulate and the right spot in the middle. So that has led to me doing, in startup speak, a lot of things that don't scale. However, I am thinking about, as you said, you do have to be thinking about risk all the time. Like, what risks am I taking? If I'm the person in charge of marketing, whereas before I had a marketing person, I'm the person in charge of sales, whereas before I had a dedicated salesperson or sales team. Um, that's all well and good in terms of, like, not having to worry about having the wrong personnel, although maybe I'm not the right person. But I am taking risks. There's things that are not getting done, or maybe not getting done as well as they could be or should be. I have to constantly be checking myself on. Um, you know, I'm trying to balance basically the risk that we invest too much in the wrong person or the wrong technology, whatever it is. It's not just people. It's any kind
Yeah.
of investment that you make. The wrong, marketing strategy against, the risk that I miss an opportunity. Right now feels like we are okay on the opportunities. And so I'm just pursuing them as best I can, and trying to improve myself as well. Like, recognizing I'm not I'm not a top tier salesperson. If I can get myself up to, like, being, a slightly above average salesperson, then combined with being the person who knows, everything about the company, and frankly, can direct things. Like we have one of the privileges of being a founder who's leading sales is that when an opportunity comes along, somebody needs a new feature in order to execute it. I can make the decision like, yeah, we're going to build that. And a sort of a hired salesperson doesn't really have that privilege. So it can make up for a lack of skill. So look, opportunity cost, the risk. Every decision you take has a risk. You have to be thinking about it, thinking about what you're leaving on the table, and just do the best you can.
Yeah, I think that's the major story as well that message that wants to get out there is realize that you're doing the best you can with the information and situation that you're in right now, even at the level of higher management, C-level or whatever, or founder. You're just, rolling the dice each day and realizing that there might be a wrong dice in there. It's as simple as that. But I do hear you say very clearly that self-awareness is very important right there. So it's amazing to hear that way that you brought it up, where pendulum, where you can throw it one side to the other very consciously, it can save your business, a lot of problems in the end. Even if you take that, of course, absolutely. It's amazing what you've been doing, Peter. And I think people might, get a little bit of a trigger to hear more from you or read more from you. Where can they find you? How can they contact you?
The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find there. Just search for my name. I should be one of the few Peter Bonneys who comes up. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I will share random thoughts from time to time about leadership, about technology, about AI, about startup life, about I think the most popular post I ever had was actually about conference managers. Random.
Okay.
So find me on LinkedIn, and that's where you should go.
Nice. Is there any message that you want to put out there that might inspire a leader, aspiring current leader, or whomever, that you really want to put out there?
The whole experience that I've had professionally has been to face failure, lean into the failure, learn from it, and do better next time. And that's all we can do. We're all imperfect humans. None of us comes out as fully formed. I'm now 47, going on 48. I don't feel like I'm winding down. I feel like I'm just ramping up. That like the 25 plus years experience I have professionally is starting to like really, really sink in and maximize my capabilities. And so, just keep learning, keep growing, learn from your mistakes, make all the mistakes, take risk. You've got lots of opportunity later to put your lessons into practice.
That's a really great message. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for being on the show. It's been a wonderful conversation. A couple of nice insights, I must say.
That's been great. I really appreciate it, Nico. This was a lot of fun.
Super. And to our listeners, thank you very much again to listen to another episode of the Everlasting Fulfillment Podcast. Have a great one, everybody. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Everlasting Podcast. Let me leave you with a few questions to answer in the comments. How do you see the different topics we discussed during this interview? What are your thoughts? What stood out for you? Let us know in the comments or just send us your feedback. We launch new episodes weekly. Don't miss any by ensuring you are subscribed to the show. Click the follow button now. We depend on the organic growth of the podcast to inspire more and more people. So by giving us a 5-star review and sharing this episode with at least one of your friends who might be interested in the subject, you will significantly help more people become inspired. But more than anything, I am grateful to you for taking the time to listen to the show. If you are also a successful CEO, founder, or entrepreneur who has inspiring words to say, feel free to contact us for an interview at contact@nicovandevenne.com. thank you for listening. We will see you again soon with more inspirational conversations on achieving everlasting fulfillment.